welcome to The Groove, where we deep dive this time into the shifts and shakes in the ad tech world today with the brightest minds in the business, because that's who I have chosen. I'm Peggy Ann Saltz, of course, your host, and today we are joined by David Philippson, a leading figure in digital advertising, and together we're going to unpack the complexities and opportunities in a privacy-focused advertising era, because guess what? There are both. It is not negatives only. And David, you are my go-to for all things privacy related, especially when it comes to putting together edgy and educational, packed into one pure gold episode. No pressure here to excel, but it's great to have you. And are you excited?
Thank you, Peggy. I'm always excited to talk to you, whether it's a podcast or a webinar or a in-person panel. We all seem to have fun. And I'm also glad that you mentioned the positive side, because usually the topic of privacy can get a little bit dull and negative, and everyone's talking about the negatives. There are some positives, which I look forward to talking about.
Exactly, there are. And we have crossed paths enough, David, to know that, there are positives, and I want to zero in on those as well. A little bit about yourself. You have a long and impressive track record for people who aren't aware of that in my audience. Before Dataseat, you were also focused on this because you were part of founding the pioneering app attribution platform, and then also seeing the shift to in-app targeting, which tells me that, there was a lot of focus on innovation, a lot of room for innovation. Fast forward, how do you feel? I mean, we're living in data-constrained times, is what some people call it. Looking at your track record, looking at where we are, I mean, are those days here? Are they gone? Can Adtech still push the envelope?
I think so. I thought by the way, you were going to say, because of all this long track record, I can tell you're above 40 years old, because that's the other thing that comes from my career history. I've been doing this far too long. I'm actually 45. I've been now doing the same stuff for 15 years, which is where, by the way, some of this subject matter expertise comes from.
Yeah.
Because I think if you can look at something, the same topic over 15 years, you do end up with this unique perspective. From way back when it was the cowboy land of 2010 was really when I started the first app attribution system. And yes, things have matured, over the, I'd say, the last 10 to 5 years. The performance of mobile advertising has become far superior. A lot of that, though, was driven by consumer data being shared with Silicon Valley-based ad tech firms. And so that led to superior performance. But now legislation and consumer expectations have caught up around that data sharing. And now it's inevitable that things are tightening up on data sharing and consumer opt-outs. And if data improve the performance of advertising, then the opposite is also true. If there's less data, driving advertising, then performance may take a little dip. I think that's just a matter of fact. But the trade-off is better consumer, privacy. You can't have both. You can't have happy consumers about their data and their opt-in or opt-out, and performance advertising performing the way when anyone could take anyone's data. So yes, it's certainly evolved.
Absolutely. I think the innovation will be in figuring out a value exchange where I volunteer my data. I was going to say, pun intended, it's a perfect storm of conditions, because I don't know if you can hear it, but there is a storm outside, David. It's almost as the cosmos is saying, yes, bring David on and be disruptive. So we're going to have thunder, lightning, drama here. So disruption in the industry and here as it happens. But I want to get back to the topic of disruption, that perfect storm, because, hey, you know what? May has come and nearly gone. So post May 1st, Apple is the enforcer, or so we thought. So can you break down what's happening, what is really, truly different, why advertisers need to pay attention post May 1st?
So it was a year ago in WWDC in June, so it's amazing how fast a year has passed, that Apple announced Privacy Manifest. Just a quick headline on Privacy Manifest. It is requiring all developers that are submitting their app to store to be declaring what their code is doing and what any third-party code in their app is doing. So essentially, it is guaranteeing transparency and accountability Transparency is a developer saying, I use data about the amount of disk space on your phone, and then they give a reason why, so that I can push updates to to the app. Okay, that's allowed. Accountability comes because lots of these apps will have many different third parties' code, and so it's saying you as the app developer, you are accountable. Whether it's for an analytics, it's attribution, it's for ad serving, whatever that code is in your app, you, the app owner, is accountable. So I think that's a very good thing. May 1st was the deadline where every app being submitted for the last 3 weeks has a privacy manifest. Now, why this is so relevant to the Adtech world is front and center in all of Apple's documentation and communication is the elephant in the room, which is fingerprinting is not allowed. And all of your audience will know is that fingerprinting has been the fallback mechanism as opposed to adopting Apple's attribution system, aka SKAN. So now over the coming weeks, we're kind of waiting to seeing, all right, well, Apple said we're going to start enforcing. Are they going to enforce? And does this then force all advertisers and ad tech firms, including my own, to be using purely SKAN as an attribution system to optimize campaigns?
And they have no choice.
Hopefully that's good summary.
They have to enforce it. We're not seeing it, but they have to.
So enforcement, again, if you've been studying this over 15 years, enforcement with Apple rarely happens in real time. They rarely say this Saturday and take action on the Sunday. It just doesn't happen like that. But I do expect over the coming weeks and months to then start seeing sometimes these Apple, maybe rejects some apps from submission. Often this will then hit the public domain, usually a TechCrunch article or something like that Apple has rejected. So I'm expecting that to happen over the coming weeks and months. By the way, I think it has to, because ATT has rolled out. You and I, that both have our iPhones, plus 100 million other people, have been opting out of tracking. So from a consumer perspective, I have said, no, I don't want to be tracked by this app. Fingerprinting is still tracking me. So Apple, in my mind, will enforce this ban, because if they don't, really, it's a betrayal of that message to the consumer. The consumer said, please don't track me. Thank you, I appreciate that, Apple, give me that choice. It's now important that there is now the facility, Privacy Manifest, that is then enforced to ensure that the consumers' trust in these mechanisms is maintained as high as it is today.
It will happen. The implications, however, for advertisers in terms of strategy and compliance, because I start off talking about innovation, and now we're pushed to innovate privacy-first advertising strategies that still deliver competitive edge, but are still very much compliant and building on the credibility of what brands and businesses say they're going to do in the first place.
I think it's important that advertisers do prepare. There's two kind of preparations that they can take. First of all, let's not be the one that Apple makes the example of, when they reject your app store for being in breach of privacy. So I wouldn't want to be the product manager, the head of marketing that gets that first app rejected. So first advice to developers, to advertisers, make sure your privacy manifest is in order and you are declaring your tracking domains. That's the first thing I would do to prepare. The second is really what I think some, but certainly not all, have been doing. I think it is important that advertisers are running campaigns where the marketeers and the management are purely making decisions off SKAN data. It is almost preparing for the lights to be turned off. Even if you are still using fingerprinting with your MMP, I think you'd be crazy at this stage not to at least be attempting to run your campaigns, your marketing team, your ROAS, goals with SKAN-only, because I'm convinced that is going to happen. And then the third is making sure that you're working with partners, with ad networks, with DSPs that have got a capability and they're able to articulate that capability to you. Not, oh, don't worry, we're SKAN specialists, or don't worry, we think fingerprinting is going to be around forever. If I was the head of marketing or for one of these big developers, I'd want to be working with partners that have got a strong proposition and they can articulate it to you. How will they be optimizing a campaign that's running in 10 geos, spending 100K a month? How will they optimize performance to a downstream event? I would just ask that question and assess your partners. Whoever gives a strong answer back is likely going to be a partner that performs well in the future when these changes are enforced.
Very, very solid advice. I wasn't thinking of that. So you're on a roll here. I'd like to encourage you, David, to continue with that because that's just it. The right questions to ask, the sort of the checklist that you can make certain that, yes, your partners are respecting user privacy, but they can still deliver on performance. What are some other questions you would ask?
I think they need to study the topic themselves and have a very strong understanding. If you have a strong understanding of something, you can hold someone else to account. Ad networks, DSPs, people taking your $100,000 in IO. You should be able to hold them to account, but you can only do it if you're a subject matter expert as well. One of the reasons why we do these podcasts and webinars, Peggy, is so that the knowledge level of the market of marketeers can increase. So. Study, understand if people are talking about privacy thresholds, if people are talking about low, medium, and high conversion events, you really do want to know what they are. And I'd also then, we talk at the beginning, you'll talk about, the storm and doom and, positivity and negativity. Let's lean towards positivity. There is a lot of positive with SKAN, and all we hear in the press is the negative side. I'll happily point out what some of those positive attributes are, but that, for me, some of them are game changing. So I'd study the subject, become a subject matter expert. Don't outsource expertise. Become the expert yourself, because you'll be able to hold them all to account. That's another bit of my advice. But there's lots of positives which I can point out for you as well, if you wish, or we can stay on doomsday. It's up to you.
Absolutely want to hear those positives because I've been thinking that one point is that it's at least what I hear from speaking with all the marketers, doing all the interviews, and they're like, well, you know what? It pushes us to up our game. So I mean, it has a plus side in the skill set. You have to think about context now, things we didn't talk about before. But no, that's what I'm hearing as a positive. It makes everything a stretch goal, but that's a good thing. What are some of the positives you're hearing?
Just to reiterate and agree with what you said, I think the role of a marketeer has changed in the last year or two because of this very subject. It has become more technical, but that to me is fascinating. And you're doing the same old thing, turning the handle for the last 10 years. It gets boring anyway. So embrace change. Embrace new subjects. It actually then makes everyone's role a bit more exciting. That's not the main positive. I'll move on. And I'm going into technical positives because everyone will be comparing SKAN compared to what they used to have with IDFA and MMP tracking. All right, I will point out some clear advantages of SKAN that didn't exist with MMP. So the first thing, when I was running an attribution system, all of the market, all MMPs wanted multi-touch attribution, but we couldn't achieve it because of the SRNs, the self-reporting networks, wouldn't play ball. This was Meta, Google, Twitter, weren't playing ball. With SKAN, we have multi-touch attribution. That is a big deal. And so as opposed to last touch, everyone's quite cynical. Multi-touch is the best combination. We now have that, and it includes the Facebook and the Googles of the world. Secondly, it wasn't long ago that no marketeer had publisher transparency. You'd be running a campaign and you'd ask an ad network or DSPs, oh, what are the top publishers? And they'd give you some hashed, rubbish ID. But now with SKAN, you know exactly that the top performing, game publisher for you is Bubble Blast or whatever it is. So you've got increased transparency. I can go on. I've got 3 others. Redownloads with MMPs were never accurately tracked. Redownloads with SKAN are accurately tracked. If you were hyper casual or different terms, dating have a huge amount of redownloads, particularly around Valentine's Day or New Year. Getting that accurately tracked is very important. And just the 2 others, we now have click through and view through on SRNs. If you're working with Google UAC, which used to be called in the past, you'd never get that split of view versus click on your performance. You now have that. And the biggest one, they're all good ones. The biggest one, though, could be considered. I believe there is a lot less opportunity for bad actors and fraud due to the cryptographic signatures of SKAN. I think that the majority of bad actors and their methodologies have been removed once advertisers move purely to a SKAN-only attribution system. There you go. There's 5
Yeah.
big positives there that I very rarely hear people talk about, and I think that needs to be more front and center than all the doom and gloom.
I was just thinking about the multi-touch. You're absolutely right. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time and writing about all the different types of attribution and the ad fraud. And you're right, we couldn't see into that at all. And redownloads are extremely important for your strategy because you're understanding whether or not they're a brand new user or, essentially the ones you've had before. So
Yes.
it's
And could you have got them back anyway through your own SRM? An existing user, you may have their email address or their phone number. Could you have got them back without paid advertising? Can you do more with organic? There's so many additional incremental possibilities on top of these features.
because you're seeing how you got them and you're seeing how you engage with them. And that feeds into a more data-driven strategy, which is what we were supposed to have before. It's supposed to be that way, not just levers up and down and sort of like the mill of UA. So you can't talk about platforms, of course, without looking at Google, right? So let's chat a little bit about Google, right? The delay on deprecating third-party cookies until 2025. People I'm talking to are like, hey, this is good. We've got a breather, but it's clear we don't. We still need to act. So, David, from your experience, what are some immediate steps that publishers, DSPs, agencies need to take to adapt effectively? Because it's not a breather. It feels like it. And I know people who are like, have a wait and see attitude. I was talking off record to one of them. He's like, let's do the math here. And he was like, putting it all together, it has to wait. We have legacy devices. It's going to be a while. His math came out to
Yeah, you're
2028.
talking about my friend's Piyush,
Yeah, I
because we
know.
think very similarly, and I know exactly what he would have said because I've been on a podcast with him
2028,
recently.
exactly. He's done the math.
I'll give you context. So this is,
Okay.
and in my point of view, I'm looking particularly at Google Sandbox from an app perspective. They're doing other stuff in Chrome and cookies, but I'm talking specifically about Sandbox, for app, and particularly the deprecation of GAID in a similar way to IDFA disappeared. So that's kind of my narrowed down topic. Firstly, I wouldn't say do nothing because it's ages away, but I would repeat the message that I said before, which is learn the subject. There's again, if SKAN was technical, harsher on the marketing teams. Sandbox is technical, but a lot kinder on the marketing teams. Why? Because Google is an Adtech firm as well. So they're actually approaching the innovation of Sandbox, and they're innovating as they go. They didn't have a master plan that devised to themselves that they've just enforced on the industry. They are actually developing it with input from DSPs. We're part of the Google beta program, with SSPs, with MMPs. So we're all working closely with Google to be able to achieve. Don't get me wrong, their boss. They ask for our input and our feedback, but their goal is to reach a consumer privacy standard while still enabling the ad tech industry to do what it does to a certain degree. So, for example, retargeting is something that is very strong on Android because of Google Advertiser ID. They may serve you an advert because you had downloaded, added shopping basket but didn't purchase. They'd serve you an advert. That is entirely reliant on your GAID. Now, if your Google Advertiser ID disappears, what will replace it? Well, Google is developing the Protected Audiences API to be able to help ad tech firms and the advertiser in a privacy compliant way still be able to recognize users that appear within a group. So you maintain some privacy of an individual, but still allowing some level of retargeting. The same with user acquisition. Behavioral targeting has been what has driven most performance advertising to date. And just quick 101, behavioral advertising would be if we knew that you had 3 dating apps on your phone, Peggy, and if they knew that, they would then serve you another dating app. Or there might be, you've got 3 travel apps because you're a frequent traveler. They would serve you travel app. That is a form of behavioral advertising. So that will disappear, or rather the ability for ad tech firms to gather that data will disappear, but they are then giving a similar capability without the individual PII within it, known as the Topics API. So all of this is developing. It hasn't been fully baked. This is then going back into the timeline that our mutual friend Pierce referred to. Um, if you think of what operating system we're on today, I think we are well into next year when this gets baked in. Both will exist. A fully baked Sandbox and GIID will exist because they're not going to replace one until they know that the other is fully functional. So I then think we could be in 27 until it's like, right, this is deemed a success, then remove GIID. So agreeing with Pierce that the timeline is like the timeline when we have to advertise in the world without GIID could easily be 26, 27. I do not agree, however, that we don't need to do anything. We should research, we should have opinions, we should understand the subject matter knowledge because we have the ability to influence Google. If there is an absolute black hole that they've created that is bad for the advertising ecosystem and doesn't really damage Google, we've got open channels to have that dialogue with them, which, of course, the industry didn't have with Apple and SKAN. So research, know the subjects, work with partners that are working closely with Google.
Your example really brings that home, that in this time in between, there's ways of preparing for this and thinking, well, what do I do when I understand an individual, but not as an individual, but as part of a group? And how does that impact, for example, my behavioral targeting as well as my contextual advertising? So maybe you can give me an idea of what that means within an app environment with these changes that Google in particular will be bringing forth.
Sure. Well, I think it's worthwhile me just giving a quick explanation of behavioural versus contextual, because often these terms are used, but even within my own team, a growing team, I'll spend time making sure that people understand the differences. Behavioural is what I just said. If an ad tech firm is able to gather device IDs of apps on your phone, they'll know whether you're a match 3 payer. You play match 3 games and you deposit money. They'll know whether you're using dating apps, whether you're using travel apps, and they will target you because of your in-app behaviour, behavioural advertising. Okay, right, now imagine a world where the Adtech firm, Dataseat, we're a purely contextual DSP, we haven't collected any of that data, we haven't built a profile on Peggy, we don't know that you play match 3 games or you use Expedia or whatever app to book your travels to Europe. We don't know that. Okay, so how can we drive effective advertising? Contextually. And the best way or analogy, it's what advertising used to be. It's why if the advertiser was BMW, why I would serve an advert on the Financial Times. Because the context, context that you find that user in is a good fit for the advertiser. To actually, and just to expand that analogy, the publisher is the new audience. So you'll see an increased focus on contextual campaigns where the advertiser with the ad network will agree a publisher whitelist that represents the audience that they are trying to target for their advertised brand. So that's one of the biggest variables in contextual performance, is the publishers that you run on. This does have implications because most behavioral campaigns would run of network, which is on any publisher, hundreds of thousands of publishers. If I find someone I know, I'd serve them an advert, so I know they're a match 3 payer. That's over. Context will always run on a publisher whitelist. And by the way, that's one of the ways, if you are an advertiser, that you'll be able to know, are you working with a contextual ad network or not? If you're working with a contextual ad network, they will only ever run on approved publisher allow lists. And that will continue to be the norm in iOS. As soon as Apple have banned fingerprinting, contextual, it will become the norm. And when Google Advertiser ID disappears, that will also be a very significant part of performance advertising on Android. But there will be some additional intent signals provided from Google's API. I mentioned one, which was the Topics API. So via Google Sandbox in a privacy compliant way, you'll still be able to get some signal. It won't be that I know that Peggy's GAID is a match 3 payer that pays more than $1,000 a month. It won't be that level, but you'll get some indication of preference via the Sandbox Topics API.
So it's going to be more and more about understanding publishers, understanding what a quality audience looks like, understanding what quality publishers are,
Yeah.
what they look like, and working that into a much richer approach to acquisition, as well as driving that full funnel, those deep funnel um, activities as well. So you won't
I,
you will have it in mind. If I want someone who's going to register, that's his level of commitment. That's what I'm going to find from a certain audience on a certain publisher.
I agree, and in addition to that, I think needs to be even more focus on an advertiser's own audience, having a deep understanding, of their behaviour, of their demographic, because only by truly understanding that, and some developers don't. Some developers just get a download and they don't know anything about them, because they just outsource all of that to ad tech firms that were doing things with device ID. So that goes a focus on your user base. The closer relationship you have with your users, the more information they'll voluntarily share with you, such as gender, age, other preferences, likes, dislikes. And then I think advertisers having a focus at building that relationship with their user base, it now has a tangible, or rather it will do on Android, a tangible upside, which is these users will be asked to opt in.
Verve as a group also works with publishers. If they're thinking about how to monetize their audiences further, they need to know their audiences better. And it's not just first party data. You made that very clear. It's, reconnecting with them, communicating with them. Just curious from your perspective, David, because you look at the entire industry, maybe what this looks like in a privacy centric environment. What does a good publisher, what are some good practices to build this transparency, to build this trust while still thinking about performance down the road?
I think it's a great question. I'm expecting, and I'm aware of, a lot of innovation that is happening on that side. I don't know whether you're aware of my parent company, Verve Group, that have released Atom SDK, which is part of their SDK built into Smarter and Pub Native, which is actually able to collect contextual signals but keep them on the device and actually enrich bidstream signals with contextual signals. So in that instance, there isn't any immediate action the publisher needs to take, except to engage with it can be by myself, please just DM me, with Pub Native and Smarto. Because they, on the supply side, as the world turns contextual, those that are delivering more contextual signals in a bid request to the demand side are going to drive better performance, have better CPMs. Those publishers will then make more money. They'll be able to develop better content for consumers. But I'd say definitely keep on top of contextual innovation that is coming for publishers to actually better generate additional signals on bid requests that will then deliver higher CPMs. And then the other things that we mentioned earlier, which is just maintaining a trusted relationship with your users. They're more likely to opt in and gives you rights and consent to engage in these privacy compliant methodologies.
I have to say, David, I was not aware. I can't know everything, and there's been a lot going on in the industry.
Yeah.
I've been traveling. I wasn't aware of that from Verve, but what I am excited about is I was just thinking we need something that will allow the collection of signals and sort of the enriching of those signals for publishers. And that's exactly what we're going to be seeing. We're going to be seeing more of it. So we are going to be seeing innovation in this way, because this is the way it needs to go. This is what it is to operate in a contextual world.
Yep, and sharing signals about a user's intent without a persistent identifier, without PII. That is the key. To be able to share that someone is a traveler or a commuter or a regular retail engager without sharing PII or identifiers that allow profiles to be based and that data to be used and abused. That is the area that we'll see significant innovation around. And you know me, Peggy, I'm never on these things to sales pitch. I actually sometimes push back. So I don't want to do sales pitches because I'd rather just share knowledge because that's the best way.
Something I'm going to look into, because that's what my audience wants. They want to understand what is out there, what are the options, because ultimately it's all really about them. How are they going to be better versions of themselves? How are they going to do their work better? David, I love chatting with you. You're that mix of seasoned and cynical is what I wrote down in my notes, but also not afraid to call out the positives, which is bold. It's so easy to sort of go onto, I won't say it, but yes, I will say it, onto like a bro show where we're just going to say, oh, everything basically sucks. And so therefore let's all complain. No, let's look for solutions. And I know that you do that. I know you also meditate. You also find strength in your family. You support them in what they do, and vice versa. So you're drawing from something to keep a balance of positive and negative, not just in what you see in the industry, but everywhere in these changing and challenging times. So what I'd like you to leave us with is some advice for our audience to do the same.
Oh wow! I didn't know you were going to ask me such a fundamental philosophical question to round things up. I've got to come up with something inspiring. I haven't got time, so I'll just say first that comes into my mind. You've mentioned my family; they are my why. Ever since I've become a father, I have a 6 and a 5-year-old. I have a lovely wife. Everything I do is for them and for us, and that is what gives me the passion and drive to do what I do at work. I enjoy what I do. I do, but it comes from my why. I think everyone's got to have a why. If you haven't got one, go find one. It can be because you want to climb Everest. It could be anything. Have a strong why. It's your purpose in life. We've all experienced periods of our lives where we haven't had purpose, and that sucks. I think that's a big cause of some anxiety and depression that I've also experienced at some point in my life. Have purpose. If you ain't got any, go find it. Meet people, speak with people, surround yourself with people that you admire, and you will become similar to them. There you go. That's the best I can do without any warning.
That's beautiful, and it's true because it's about being grounded, having a reason, having a purpose, having a why in life, and just following that. So yes, very on the spot, but I wanted to ask you this since I've met you. And that's it. Sometimes the simplest is the most elegant, is what they say. I studied philosophy and
Thank
science. The simplest is always the most elegant, and it is always correct. Look at the cosmos.
and thank you, Peggy. And you're one of the people that I've enjoyed spending time with. And as I said, I think you do become more and more similar to people that you spend time with and surround yourself with, and you're one of them. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, David. And to that, I hope very, very much our paths continue to cross. And I know they will because we're both out there and we will be seeing each other again soon. And for our audience, of course, now they're inspired. They want to get in touch with you as a professional and as a person. Maybe just leave us with a few quick notes. How can they do that? Where can they find you? What's the best way to keep the conversation going?
Sure. If anyone would like to speak with me, please just DM me on LinkedIn. It's David Philippson on LinkedIn, or my email address is david@dataseat.com. Happily discuss any of the professional topics that we discussed today. Or if you want to get into a bit of meditation and cold plunges and purpose, also available to give guidance there too. Thank you, Peggy.
Absolutely. Who can say no to that? That's a great offer and a great way to end it. Thanks again, David, so much for sharing.